So I'm going to clear up a really big misconception here. It's a huge source of confusion and something that a lot of people really don't seem to understand, and it all has to do with these things. These are double-threaded or reverse thread screws. You see them often in hardware stores these days, and they're just sitting right there on the shelf next to your normal single-threaded screws. I just want to say right now that these are not the screws for your average project. In fact, you may never want to use them because they're only for specific applications, and they can cause serious problems in normal applications. So today, I'm going to explain why that is. But if you want to understand even more about fasteners, materials, tools, and more, be sure to get your free copy of our interactive guide, The Ultimate Carpentry Checklist. This visual glossary will explain the 150 most important topics in carpentry, everything you really need to know. It's perfect for beginner carpenters, advanced DIYers, and everyone in between. And you can get it completely free right now down in the description and comments below, or you can find out even more about it at thehonestcarpenter.com. Just check the links. Okay, so double-threaded or reverse thread screws have this section of thread on the neck that runs opposite the normal thread direction on the shaft below. They come in a lot of different patterns, and I'll discuss some of those. But there's a common misconception that this reverse thread portion near the head is there to draw the board tighter and hold it in place more securely. And that would seem to make sense because you usually see this thread on trim head screws, which, with their smaller head, don't grip as tightly as full head screws. But extra grip is not what these reverse threads are for. Instead, what they were created for is usage with composite materials. I'm talking about PVC trim and composite decking primarily. Because they're impervious to rot, these plasticine materials are being used a lot these days for water-sensitive areas like decks, house exteriors, and bathrooms. I've talked about PVC trim on the channel before, but the problem is that those materials don't receive fasteners exactly the way that wood does. Composite materials don't have a grain that can split around a fastener. Instead, they just compress from fastener insertion, and this compression can cause warpage, usually in the form of mushrooming. Mushrooming is the tendency of PVC and composites to sort of bulge up around a fastener head. A little circular bump can form, which isn't something you want to see on a new composite deck. Also, you'll often see kind of a plastic swarf, like ragged shreds, where the fastener was installed. And that's annoying for aesthetics when you're driving like hundreds or thousands of fasteners. So these reverse thread screws were designed to address this specific problem. The reverse set of threads beneath the head actually act like a counter bore. As the lower main threads pull the screw into the bottom material, the second threads widen the hole behind them. This pulls waste down and creates some clearance for the head of the screw, which results in a much cleaner finished appearance for the fastener. So it speeds things up for tradespeople who are installing a lot of PVC trim or composite decking, and it saves them from having to countersink everything with extra drills and bits. But the problem is this design does not translate well to wood, and here's why. The screws seem to install just fine at first. They drive smoothly because many are self-drilling with special cutting threads on the tip, and they finish cleanly with a nice natural countersink. But the problem comes in when you try to back them out. The lower screw threads push themselves out of the bottom material, but they can't back out of the top material. So instead, they just lift the top piece off the bottom surface and the screw gets stuck in the piece you attached. The bottom threads can't grab the top material because the reverse threads have reamed it out. Also, when your drill is in reverse, the upper threads are basically spinning on drive, the wrong direction. So you'll often get this board with the screw stuck in it that is really hard to remove. And you were installing this piece, so presumably it's a nice piece that you still need. This is so aggravating, and if you have installed multiple screws, you suddenly have these stuck screws everywhere. Sometimes you just can't seem to get the piece removed at all. We have to reposition or remove things a lot in carpentry. That's why we invented screws. But this screw has cut off our retreat because we can't get it to back out. Now, this screw sticking can happen in normal screws too, especially if they have an unthreaded portion of the shaft. But that's easily fixed by just pushing down on the top board while you spin the screw backwards. The threads will eventually reach the material, re-engage, and back out. But reverse thread screws typically just won't let you do that, which can make them a really bad option for wood usage. The one situation in which some carpenters tell me they actually help is with certain trim installations. You can sink a board tight, then pull it back out a bit with the reverse thread so it's in a position you want. Perhaps you need some space for creating a reveal. But that's a very pro application, and honestly, you can accomplish the same thing by just shimming. So even if it's a time saver, it's not always necessary. And keep in mind, you will see other larger types of full head screws that may have a smaller reverse thread portion near the bottom threads. But this countersink section is just a bit different. It usually just makes installation easier and keeps the pilot hole clean. It's not as detrimental for removal because the reverse threads are not wider than the base threads. They just cut down on grain splitting. But when it comes to these reverse thread trim head screws, trust me, if you're installing wood components, stick to screws with a single thread. They're much easier to remove and they still tend to have a nice clean finish. And they won't have you pulling your hair out because your board now looks like a porcupine. I'll link a few good screw varieties down below, and be sure to grab your free copy of the Ultimate Carpentry Checklist. This is the greatest free resource for new and advanced carpenters anywhere on the web, and I guarantee you will learn a lot from it. You can find out even more at thehonestcarpenter.com. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Ethan James with thehonestcarpenter.com. I'll see you next time.